Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Silly season is kicking into overdrive today with various rumours emerging that Red Bull have given Fernando Alonso an offer to join the Red Bull team for next season. Fernando though is not so keen on this idea, while Max Verstappen stays in the team, potentially becoming the second driver in a relatively short space of time to duck the Max Verstappen challenge. Although, could you really see Alonso turning down the chance to go to that Red Bull seat if the offer is on the table? Reportedly, Mercedes already have their contract side of the bargain signed out for Verstappen if he does want to leave Red Bull after all, with all the internal drama. So much to get into today. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, Mercedes, they had a fair few things to say on exactly why their car still remains so sensitive to all these various changing conditions. This was the front wing damage that Hamilton had, which isn't much at all really compared to what some drivers have had, and even Hamilton himself. Let's not forget what Jeddah 2021, after all the chaos of that race, he had a severely damaged front right wing. The end plate was missing, the wing was clearly damaged, and he was still absolutely rapid. So for some reason with these cars, and it seems like this Mercedes especially, most of the time you see damage happens and end plate disappears and the car handles okay. But for whatever reason, this was massively affecting that Mercedes machine, and as Chauvelin basically says, it was really hurting him on the first stint. The track was hot, the car was understeery already, in addition to that loss of downforce. The reason why Hamilton was then stronger on the final stint on the mediums was because in the pit stop they could put the flap angle back in, change the front wing angle to make the car less understeery, and therefore it worked better at the end of the Grand Prix as a result. But that was one of the reasons why. They just go on to discuss though that again, if the wind changes, if the temperature changes, the Mercedes is still incredibly volatile when it comes to qualifying and race performance, and this is really why I think Toto Wolff is on such a PR crusade that no, we understand the car, we're making some big steps. The results don't show the full picture of what Mercedes are capable of, because he's trying his best to say to Max, look, we are still a competent team here, please come and join me, and apparently that is literally what is going on, as we shall see here over the coming minutes. And Mercedes did say they believe they have a more stable platform now, but like, come on, we keep hearing this stuff from Mercedes, and I'm not sure it's ever necessarily going to be true, and certainly the Verstappen camp will be of the mindset of, well, there are a few reasons to leave Red Bull, the issue is there's not enough reasons to join any of the other potential candidate teams. That is how it presently appears to me. Ferrari, though, of course, they've got their driver lineup set for next season. 3 major upgrade packages in the works they will deliver this year. The first one at Imola, that's been referred to as effectively the Ferrari 2.0 upgrade package. We talked about it yesterday. They're changing many things on the car. The sidepod inlets, the sidepod themselves, the floor, the wings, the diffuser. There's loads of elements they're looking to change, and the positivity for Ferrari is that they weren't really that far behind a dominant Suzuka Red Bull, given that Red Bull brought a relatively sizable upgrade and Ferrari brought nothing at all, especially compared to where they were with respect to Red Bull 6 months ago, the last time we were in Japan. So, you know, whether you call it hopium or whatever, I think there's no doubt that Ferrari are finally the best positioned team to actually take the challenge to Red Bull at some point. And last season, Red Bull were able to push off many of their upgrades, not really do all that much because they had the dominant machine and they were always going to win both championships. Ferrari with 3 major upgrades in the works, and let's be real, every single upgrade Ferrari have brought now for some time has actually worked. I think to me the key race on Ferrari's trajectory over the last year or so was Japan last year. When they brought that upgrade, they took a step forward, and it was very rare for Ferrari in previous years to actually bring upgrades that worked. Historically, they would just get, you know, categorically outdeveloped by Mercedes or Red Bull or whoever in, let's say, 2017, 2018, 2022 is another example of starting off very well, then not delivering. Last year was arguably the first time in a very long time they brought an upgrade to Japan. It actually improved their car and they got closer to the front runners. So if those upgrades continue to work and deliver the expected performance, because Red Bull's upgrades deliver the expected performance, Mercedes upgrades historically have done, but that has not been the case over the last 2 or 3 years really. So yeah, the 2.0 package is on the way, but let's talk about the driver market, because it's absolute chaos right now behind the scenes. This period between now and China, and certainly with Miami and then Imola on the horizon, is going to be massively interesting in terms of what happens next year, because last year nothing really happened, but as soon as Hamilton joins Ferrari, that is a bombshell that is dropped, and the repercussions are severe. Aston Martin, they want to keep Alonso. Apparently, that is the plan. We have heard rumours internally that there are some factions at Aston that would prefer Alonso to go and bring in Carlos Sainz instead. The reality is that as serious of an organisation Aston pretend to be, with their new wind tunnel, their new factory, they still employ Lance Stroll, and that's always where it gets, somewhat frustrating from the outside looking in. But Mike Crack says, yeah, Honda, we're coming in for 2026. That's going to be a works partnership. Makes a lot of sense why there's much optimism. And Alonso seems to believe that, well, either I'll stay at Aston or I'll go to Red Bull. And apparently, though, the Red Bull offer is there. And that's when things get absolutely fascinating. We've heard Christian Horner apparently wants Alonso to the team. Christian Horner, I wouldn't say he wants revenge on Jos Verstappen after everything that's happened behind the scenes, although that may well be true to some degree. But I just think that Christian Horner feels that, well, Jos and Max, they're not going to get their way. I'm going to make the decisions what I want to do. And if I want to bring in a stronger second driver to Max, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And this is why we've heard the rumours that, Carlos Sainz, it's not out of the realms of possibility that he could join Red Bull. One of the key decisions, though, is what happens to Adrian Newey, because the feeling is, as we'll see in a second, Max is not satisfied with the way the status quo is at Red Bull. We know that Horner and Marco and all the other parties have been at war really behind the scenes for some time, but Newey is clearly a massively important piece to the puzzle, and we know that Newey has offers from Aston. Apparently they've given him a big offer to join those guys, and apparently Ferrari as well. I think Aston actually denied that they'd given Newey an offer. Okay, that was rumoured in the press, say what you want about that. Ferrari have not denied it. And frankly, I'd be surprised if they hadn't had a few words with Adrian Newey to try and make it work. Because if there is any time to get Newey away from Red Bull with all the internal chaos, now is absolutely the time. And even Helmut Marko says that, yeah, that offer that he seemingly received is not the first and probably won't be the last. So if Newey decides to part ways, that could be an important catalyst for Max to potentially depart the team as well. Now, Nico Hülkenberg, the belief is that he's going to go to Audi. This seems almost locked in at this point. Makes a lot of sense. Very dependable, experienced driver. German as well. Makes so much sense for Audi as it presently stands. But of course, Sergio Perez, he said the other day, he's hoping within a couple of weeks, if not the next month, to know what his future is going to be. And Red Bull seem to be leaning away from keeping Sergio Perez as it stands, based on what we are about to discuss. Yuki Tsunoda as well is considered to be on Audi's radar if Sainz goes elsewhere. So if Sainz was going to go to Aston or to Mercedes or potentially to Red Bull, then Yuki to Audi is apparently a possibility, and even admitted that Tsunoda is being noticed on the market. And if you're Yuki, if you really feel like a Red Bull promotion isn't going to happen, which it's probably not, Audi might be one of the best options, unless, of course, Aston Martin are interested. I think Stroll on his day can be respectable, but I would just love to see a world in which that second Aston seat was actually available. But unfortunately, that is not the reality that we live in. So this is the AMUS article today, detailing everything they currently know on the Mercedes, Verstappen, Red Bull related driver market. So let's just dive straight into it, because there is a lot to say here. The driver market last year was very quiet. This year, ever since Hamilton to Ferrari, has been a very different story. Then, as it goes on to say, Verstappen's contract until 2028 suddenly no longer seems set in stone. The world champion is on the market if the balance of power at Red Bull changes. In other words, if Marco leaves or has to leave. So this is the belief that Marco put this clause in Verstappen's contract where if they want to leave, if Marco departs, if he resigns or if he gets fired, that allows Max to leave as well. And the feeling is that Max will not remain in a team that Marco isn't in. So if Marco decides to bite the bullet and leave, or if Horner, effectively now his power seems solidified, kicks Marco out, these things are still yet to be determined. And, AMUS say this is not a pipe dream. This isn't, a 1% chance. This is a realistic possibility. The issue is that the only realistic address for Verstappen is Mercedes. Even if Aston Martin manages to lure star designer Newey, it is said that Lawrence Stroll is on a shopping spree with a big wallet, which I'm not surprised at. Apparently, the Newey to Aston thing is intended as bait for Max. And if they do that, you've got to think Aston is at least a possibility, just because the Honda partnership, it would make some sense. But as the article goes on to describe, Mercedes makes maybe more long-term sense of Verstappen. And also they double down on this idea we discussed the other day, that Toto Wolff is offering Max a brand ambassador role, which is quite something, because in terms of, look, Verstappen and Hamilton, both great drivers, but in terms of marketability, there's only one winner. And the fact that Mercedes didn't offer this deal to Hamilton and Ferrari did, and now they're going to offer this to Verstappen, who was like their chief rival for so many years, is just really weird to me as a business decision. But even if that was attractive for Max, if the car's crap, it doesn't matter, right? And that's what they say. The winning team is sportingly out of sorts at the moment. The engineers are struggling to understand their car. Aston Martin, their team is under construction, so the hard line is in the Verstappen clan, so, Max and Jos and those guys hesitate to decide for Mercedes. So therefore, Max is going to take his time. He has the luxury of taking his time to assess the situation. Marco wouldn't sacrifice himself if he felt like it could harm his loyal comrade in arms in Max in some sense. Mercedes is also in no hurry. This is the other point for Mercedes, is that they feel like, well, you know what? We don't need Alonso. We don't need Sainz because we've got Russell. And if we can't get Max, they'll get Kimi Antonelli. I think that is now the plan for Toto, is he's thinking, you know what? Let's just see if Max wants to join us, which, seems right now out of the realms of possibility because their car's so bad. But if they somehow turn it around over the next few races with the Imola package or whatever, then all of a sudden Verstappen might think, you know what, for 2026 especially, this might make some sense. For Max, you've got to at least show him that he has a car that can potentially win a race. And probably Toto's thinking, well, if Max doesn't decide to join, then we've always got the Kimi Antonelli backup plan, which seems to be the strategy right now. And apparently, internally at Mercedes, they've already approved the Verstappen costs. This has already been determined. The current world champion is said to be more expensive than Hamilton, including all success bonuses. But if Verstappen was to come, it would have to work out for Mercedes, and the plan is, like, just give him a car. But obviously Mercedes very keen to try and actually get this one done. So this is when we get onto the whole Alonso and Sainz side of the discussion here. So you don't want to give Alonso and Sainz the time to play poker for too long. Audi is pushing for a decision with Sainz. So they want Sainz. That's a no-brainer. The relationship with his father, Carlos Sainz Sr., but for Sainz, it's like, is that the best option? Given the Red Bull opportunity, maybe Mercedes, although unless you're a Verstappen, that's probably a stopgap for the Kimi Antonelli situation, to be honest. I'm not sure I'd go for that, especially coming from Ferrari. And Aston Martin and Red Bull are pushing Alonso. This is the most interesting part of the article to me. The ultimatum is due to expire the week after next. So apparently there is 2 or 3 weeks here pretty much for these guys, especially Alonso, to determine what is going on. But Red Bull, it seems, based on what the article says, is looking to get Alonso into their team. That is what they want. They seemingly want Alonso for Perez. Alonso, though, might not be so keen. Now, he's no spring chicken, Alonso, but Alonso did say, literally this past weekend, that his weekend in Japan was a top 5 race of his entire career. And whether you believe in terms of weekends, right? So performance, himself, with respect to the car, he reckons that was one of his absolute best weekends ever, i.e. he is still performing at his absolute peak performance levels. And on some characteristics, maybe you can argue that is still the case. And Alonso, I think, is saying that to attract the attention of the big teams. So it seems like he's done that. So surely you take the contract, right? But apparently it's not so clear. Alonso's advantage is that being almost 43, he doesn't have to plan for the next 5 seasons. Alonso would sign any contract for a winning car. For him, it's about crowning a conclusion, really, to his career. But the Verstappen number can still drag on, and a cockpit at Red Bull is only attractive for Alonso, the record participant, if he doesn't have to compete against Verstappen. So this is the real bit to me, is the article says that Alonso would love a winning car. Like, I think even for Alonso, surely going to Red Bull and just getting a win, like a race win, getting number 33 or whatever, like that would be a success. And I'm sure Alonso, given all that he said, surely he feels like he can challenge Max. But the article is saying that he is, maybe as Norris has been scared, as people say, and give him criticism for, and unwilling to go to Red Bull to challenge Max. Apparently Alonso feels the same way, that if Verstappen is still there and doesn't leave, Alonso is concerned that he might get embarrassed, I guess, is the implication here at Red Bull, which is, I hope this isn't the case, because there's only a few drivers on the grid, to me, that have the dog in them to go and challenge Max. And I thought Alonso was definitely one of them, but maybe that's not quite the case. Norris, we know, believes, and maybe he's right to believe, but he believes that his best chance of beating Max is to build up his own team in McLaren. And maybe in 2026, if McLaren do a good job, Mercedes build a great engine, that might be proven correct. But I'm sure, Hamilton, we believe he was even trying to talk to Red Bull to get that seat. Remember when Christian Horner leaked that Anthony Hamilton, Lewis's father, had spoken to Red Bull to try and get that potential operation done. And we thought at the time, oh, come on, that must just not be true. And then he joins Ferrari, and you think, well, actually, probably those whole Red Bull stories were true, that Hamilton was interested in going to the fastest car, and Hamilton is perfectly willing to go to Ferrari and challenge Leclerc over there. So I think Hamilton would do it. I think Russell, for all the criticism he gets, he would back himself against Max, I think. I think Carlos Sainz is the same, probably Charles Leclerc is the same. And I would have said Fernando Alonso was the same as well, but potentially not. And he knows if he stays at Aston what he gets, you know, state-of-the-art brand new facility, the wind tunnel, the simulator, the test benches, like everything like that. But and they can offer him a contract that is reasonably long. And if Aston were to get Newey, then maybe it's quite attractive for Alonso to stay. But, you know, if I'm Alonso and Red Bull really are knocking on the door because Christian Horner really wants me in that team, either to put like some serious pressure on Max and Jos in that camp, or just to be there as, you know, an incredibly competitive driver that Red Bull might need with respect to the Hamilton-Leclerc combination that's happening at Ferrari in the very near future, assuming that next year's Ferrari is very competitive, it does make a bit of sense. But I think Alonso, you know, I don't know, I would expect Alonso, if this offer is true, to take it, because apparently he's got a couple of weeks to decide, and it's a decision between staying at Aston, a team that may become contenders in a few years, but probably not immediately, or joining the fastest car, and yes, probably still losing the battle to Max, let's be honest, going to his team over the course of a season. But you've got to think that Alonso would back himself to do a good job in that situation, and he'd definitely back himself to get a few race wins in the process, which is maybe what he would want to crown off his career anyway. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, the article goes on to say how Ferrari is also interested, of course, in getting Newey, but you know, Alonso has to decide quickly because Sainz is at the door as well, knocking on the door for Red Bull, knocking on the door for Aston Martin. This is where it gets interesting. Audi, Sainz is definitely at the top of the list, but the feeling is that Sainz, you know, may decide relatively soon where he's going to go, but it depends somewhat on Alonso. If Alonso hears the Horner Red Bull offer, which apparently exists, and says, okay, you know what, let's do it, you know, like, take me in there, then apparently what might happen is Sainz would probably go to Aston in that scenario. Then apparently Sergio Perez would then be in line for the Audi seat alongside Hülkenberg. That would be the plan if Sainz doesn't go. So that is pretty much where we are today. So behind the scenes, it's complete chaos. I don't think we're really waiting so much on Max here. I think we are waiting on Max to, you know, decide. And if Max does decide to leave Red Bull because of whatever happens internally, or if Horner decides to fire Marco or something, then sure, that starts a chain reaction. But I feel like Max will wait to make a call, as will probably Mercedes. The next decision maker that has to act is apparently Alonso. He needs to make the call whether he is going to sign a new deal at Aston Martin or whether he is going to supposedly take up this Red Bull offer. And if that happens, then the dominoes start to fall in terms of where Sainz could go. Because if Alonso doesn't move quickly to Red Bull, and Red Bull genuinely are interested in Alonso, they're probably interested in Sainz as well, are they not? Because, you know, getting Alonso or Sainz is maybe somewhat similar in terms of what it might mean internally for the team. I'm not sure signing Alonso is necessarily a good idea for Red Bull, given his history, shall we say, joining certain teams. But it's definitely one to look for. And even there are rumours today that little birdies behind the scenes are saying that Max is having conversations with Mercedes as it stands. And, you know, this is now underway and these conversations are being had. It's just like, if Mercedes were any better, I feel like this would be a very high likelihood. Like, my estimation of the percentage chances of this right when the season began were rather high, but now, with Mercedes constantly regressing, this is just the issue that Toto has to deal with, is that if the Mercedes this year was as good as even the W13, a car that could get podiums basically most weekends and could, you know, potentially win a race at some point, that would be good enough, I think, for Max to probably leave. But right now, it's just like, why would Max do it in this scenario? And, you know, I've seen lots of tweets implying, look, Fernando, just do it, you know, just take the seat, because I think the sport would be more entertaining, for sure, with Alonso and Max in the same car, or with Max in a Mercedes. I think that would also spice up the scene as well. So I think something like this will happen, but I guess it remains to be seen exactly which direction this is going to take. So that's all we know for now. Hopefully I broke that down well enough. Thanks for 48,100 subscribers who smashed through yesterday. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.